This is a TalkStation original podcast.
It's been a little while since we've been together in the studio, and since we were last together, one of the big news stories has been the death of Pope Francis. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit this morning. This article comes from The Stream. It's written by Jules Gomez. It's entitled Pope Francis, Messianic Reformer or Machiavellian Revisionist. The most controversial pontiff in living memory has died at the age of 88. Pope Francis, born in Argentina as Jorge Mario Bergoglio, passed away after a lengthy battle with a blood disorder, a mild acute kidney injury, and renal insufficiency. Like a Greek tragedy, Francis will be remembered as the pontiff who radiated a utopian vision of unifying the world under Friedrich Schiller's rousing call of Fratelli Tutti, brothers all, but left his own church fatally fractured. Ironically, Francis hated President Donald Trump, but was himself a towering Trumpian personality, one people either loved or hated. Millions of Catholics around the globe revered him as a prophet of mercy, an apostle of peace, and a Spartan workaholic who rejected the pomp of the papal palace, choosing to live in the Santa Marta hostel instead. They hailed his unflinching emphasis on social justice, equality, immigration, climate change, ecumenical outreach, interfaith dialogue, the decentralization of power, and his far-sighted chess maneuvers to include the marginalized, especially women, in the highest echelons of the church. But his critics saw him as a screw-tape-like character in a white zucchetto, a Marxist wrecking ball scheming to dilute and eventually dissolve distinctive Catholic doctrine by turning the glittering wine of Catholicism into the tepid water of a bland Anglicanism. For his detractors, Francis was nothing short of Machiavellian, a manipulative micromanager, a megalomaniacal dictator, and a Neville Chamberlain Redivius who struck Faustian bargains with Islamic jihadists, globalist vaccine peddlers, pro-Palestinian anti-Semites, and Beijing's communist nabobs while trading Catholicism for kitsch. Traditionalist Catholics will forever despise Francis for Traditionis Custodes, the Pope's guillotine on the traditional Latin Mass, and his unrelenting diatribes against their rigidity, backwardness, and toxic tendency to safeguard the ashes of the past. Social media wags will persist in portraying him as a temperamental windsock, from slapping the hand of an Asian woman to flinging poisoned javelins at paleo-conservative priests frocked up in laced vestments and zealous faithful engaged in evangelism. I'm going to stop reading here. This is quite a colorful article, isn't it? I mean, the writer here does a lot of alliteration. They use quite a lot of... It's a very well written article. I didn't realize I was going to have so many big words to stumble over.
Is it wrong if one of my takeaways is that from now on when I'm upset with somebody, I want to call them a temperamental windsock?
That's a great term.
Yeah.
That's a great term.
That's going to be the name of my ska band one day.
Sure.
So I have a complicated, I think, just set of emotions with all of this. Full disclosure, I'm very not Catholic. I wouldn't call myself anti-Catholic by any stretch. I'm just not Catholic. I think that there are a lot of things, just to be honest, I think there are a lot of things that are required in Catholicism that were not required by Jesus or the early church. And so I think that oftentimes the systems that are set up within Catholicism make it more difficult for people to really encounter the Lord. That being said, I do want to say this. I know that there are a lot of devout Catholics that know the Lord, are saved, have a relationship with him. So I'm not saying anything about that. I just think it's a tangled system. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, I like the general idea of let's untangle some of what's been so tangled in that system. But there's a lot of the untangling he did that I was not a big fan of. So I'm always sad to hear about somebody made in the image of God passing away. But I also know what we're in for now, and I'm just buckling up for the whole process and seeing what the smoke looks like, as they're trying to pick the new pope. And Anyway, what are your thoughts about the loss of the Pope?
Well, I am old enough that I have now been through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 popes, including Francis.
Wow.
And there were popes that I really thought a lot of. I loved John Paul II. I thought he was a great pope because he really, I felt, represented the church well on the world stage with other world leaders. I felt like he was really good at playing that game. Francis, what I liked about Francis was his humility. You know, he did not want to live in a big papal palace. He didn't want to ride around in the fancy cars. He just wanted everything to be very simple.
Oh, that's true. I didn't see that little Pope mobile a whole lot.
No. You know, when asked about things like homosexuality and stuff like that, a lot of times his answer would be, well, who am I to judge? You know, and we can look at that and say, well, you know, the Bible's pretty clear on this. Or there's other people who are going to argue the other side of that argument. Well, the Bible it more focuses on grace and love than it does judgment. But the Pope, you know, he would say, I'm just a person. You know, he didn't. I don't think that he liked to see the Pope as this elevated character who was more important than everybody else. He was just a servant of God. But I do have to wonder, are we entering into a time where the Pope, or the position of Pope, is no longer as relevant as it once was? You know, like when Queen Elizabeth passed away and Charles became the king, and people began to wonder, well, how relevant is the monarchy in England anymore? There was a time when it was. How relevant is the position of Pope now?
Well, for me personally, irrelevant.
Right, irrelevant, because
right,
you're not a Roman Catholic.
I'm not. So here's my problem when he would make comments like that. I think when somebody asks about a hot button issue and you say, it's hard to have a hard answer, who am I to judge? I think that's a fair answer for a lot of believers. I really do. Even if it sounds like a cop-out to some people. And I've got some hard opinions about those issues. That's not what we're talking about right now. My problem is when the Pope says, who am I to judge? Because if you do walk out the Catholic doctrines and you believe it, then the Pope is also called the Vicar of Christ, which means the substitute for Christ. Even the word Pope comes from the same root words of papal or papa. It's a father type. And then you're considered the substitute for Christ because they believe that Peter was the first Pope.
Correct.
That it was on that rock, on Peter, that Jesus built his church, and ever since then there's been a substitute for Christ, which is odd since Christ is alive today. But if you are the substitute for Christ, then who are you to judge? You're the head of the church, and you have to have an opinion one way or the other.
Right. And an opinion is great because, you know, I can say to someone, the way that I understand the scriptures is this, okay? This is what I believe God has told us. However, who am I to sit in a position to judge you? Okay, there's a difference between having an understanding and being the judge, because the way I understand it, God is the judge. I'm not the judge. Grace flows into me. Grace flows out from me, through me to others. Judgment can come down upon me, but judgment should not come out through me to others. That's not my place. Now, I can instruct and I can guide and I can nurture, but it's not my place to judge another person.
You know, it's interesting when Jesus says, you know, take care of the log in your own eye before you worry about the speck in somebody else's. He says, then you'll be able to see well enough to judge their issue. We all make judgments. We all make snap judgments. What people wear, how they speak. But as far as something that would have like a lasting effect, that's supposed to be very sobering. When Jesus talks about judging, he talks to his disciples about judging the 12 tribes one day. He talks to, we see in believers, I think it's Paul that speaks on believers someday judging angels. One day we'll have a clear mindset. One day we'll have a job in eternity. Right now the job is to spread the gospel and to love one another. But he is a polarizing figure, was a polarizing figure. There's a lot of those, so I'm not surprised that he didn't really jive with all of the Trump stuff. But they were both very, very very visible, very loud public people with a lot to say.
And it'll be interesting to see who follows in his steps. You know, you look at the scriptures, you had Joshua who followed Moses, you had Elisha who followed Elijah, and now we're going to see who will follow Pope Francis.